wonderful to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and share with the North Loop Seventh-day Baptist Church in the annals of Seventh-day Baptist history. That's definitely one spot of geography that stands out, and so it's wonderful to finally be able to come here and see this wonderful part of the country. So, for those of you that don't know me, I know Scott was kind enough to introduce me. I am Bill Probasco. I come to you from the Seventh-day Baptist Church in Shiloh, New Jersey. It's kind of interesting to see the similarities between Shiloh, New Jersey and North Loop. Believe it or not, Shiloh being in New Jersey, we actually do have farm fields. It's a more rural area than you might think for a place in New Jersey. One thing that is a little different out here is driving along and the road actually goes down and up a little bit from time to time. It's very flat in southern New Jersey. So it's nice to be out here and see this lovely part of the country. I'm traveling with my, let me go ahead and see the slides will go here, with my lovely wife, my chief of staff, Valerie, and my two children, Holly and Liam. I think this is only the second time I've been able to travel as president of conference and have them with me. So usually I have pictures to show. I actually can introduce you to them now. But they have come with me on this journey this past year as I've served as president of General Conference. And my job description as president of General Conference is to develop a theme for the year and to go around to the various churches and share on that theme and talk about conference that's coming up in just a little over a month. So I'd like to just take a few minutes now and tell you about conference. My theme for the coming year is Steadfast. And we're going to have conference in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Just out of curiosity, of those that are here, how many have ever been to General Conference? Okay, good. There's a few of you out there. Very good. Well, it is in Lancaster this year. It's at the Bible College there. And I did look into it. It is about a 20-hour drive, almost due east. So, couple of long days of driving will get you there. There's also, I checked into flights out of Grand Island and Omaha. So if you're interested in going, and hopefully I can encourage you or pique your interest in attending. If you're interested, the forms are in the Sabbath Recorder and online. You can go on there and fill those out. So now that I talk about how to register for conference, let's talk about the activities that are planned for this coming year. Of course, at conference we have many pastors that will come and perhaps give sermons. We'll have some seminars. We have some Bible studies, one of which will be hosted by our own Pastor Scott. I appreciate him being willing to do that. And of course, what would a conference be without business meetings? Because we are gathering together to discuss some big issues that our churches face. That's a time for getting things done at conference. Important things. It's a time to vote on our leaders, a chance to get involved. So I encourage you to get involved in the future of Seventh-day Baptist denomination. And we'll say that conference in 2015, it will be about steadfast involvement. So hopefully that's something you can be involved with. It's also a time for us to recognize new churches and pastors. It's a time we recognize years of service from many of our older pastors. We give out awards, we have tributes, and we recognize lifetimes dedicated to the service of the Lord. So Conference 2015 will be about recognizing our steadfast history as a denomination. We'll have some seminars. I'll go through some of the seminars for you. The Women's Board has asked for one that's going to be based on sort of a mini women's retreat, and those that attend to that will have materials they can bring back to their home churches and run a women's retreat back at their home church. We'll have a double seminar on debt management and financial health, something that I'm sure we can all use kind of review of our finances and how best to avoid slipping further into debt. One seminar we're going to have with a very important subject is titled Making Our Churches Safe Places for Victims of Sexual Abuse. Statistics suggest that more than half of all children in our world endure some type of sexual abuse before they turn 18. And we will have a panel that will be discussing this subject, and will involve counseling professionals and survivors of abuse to provide guidance for our churches looking to minister to those dealing in the aftermath of abuse. It's a very challenging topic, and one I think that all churches need to be prepared for to handle in a Christ-like manner. So we'll say that conference in 2015 will be about steadfast education. I have a couple of guest speakers lined up at conference. My friend Mark Hamilton is a missionary in Belarus and Lithuania in Eastern Europe. He's going to come and share how he has remained steadfast through his persecution, separation from his family, and the stress of needing financial support for an outreach that he can only discuss in person for fear of secret police monitoring his communications. Wednesday night, I've invited the Reverend Dave Bailey to come and share. He has a steadfast ministry called Ranch Hope that he started over 50 years ago. He reaches out to at-risk youth. And today, Ranch Hope for Boys houses over 90 individuals that would otherwise be in prison, juvenile detention, or maybe worse. So conference will be about steadfast missions and outreach. Conference has something for everyone. We have children's conference. That's for kids ages 4-year-old through 5th grade. And every morning they get to go to their own class. They get to have their special activities like swimming, like tour like a pretzel factory, a potato chip factory, and visit a local nursing home. In the evening there are campfire games so that parents are free to come to worship and the kids are free to go enjoy themselves. We have a staffed nursery for our little ones because we want parents with young kids to still be able to fully participate. And the junior and senior high will also have meetings and special events. They have their own Bible studies plus afternoon and evening activities. There's a special youth interest committee because as Baptists we want to get them trained up as committee members as quick as possible because that's just what we do with having committees in churches. There'll be a youth banquet, and that's going to be held at an all-you-can-eat Amish smorgasbord. So you can imagine the fun they'll have at that. So we'll say that Conference 2015 will be all about steadfast, we'll call it nurturing. There's a 5K run walk. I'll probably do more of the walking than the running, but it's a fundraiser to help offset some costs for some of the churches over in Zambia. It's a great way to participate in that. So we'll call it Steadfast Endurance at Conference. Conference is always full of music from the conference choir and praise bands and soloists. And I'm inviting church bell choir members to plan on showcasing their talents at conference. And we're going to have a Sabbath afternoon bell choir concert. As they say in Shiloh, come along and enjoy some ding-a-lings. So conference is going to be all about steadfast praise. And I want conference to not just be about business meetings. I know there are things that we need to do because it's our national meeting, but I have some other activities planned, some new ones. Every year the pastors and youth have a basketball game. It's a highlight of the week, and it's something to watch for all the reasons you might think and more. I joke, let me see if I get this up here. This right here are the pastors. I know it's basketball, but we call that the defensive line as the youth try to get through these grown men on basketball. Well, we have a very enjoyable time coming out and watching the youth playing the pastors. In my church in Shiloh, we have a winter basketball league. I see you have a church softball league, and I might touch on that in a minute. But we have a winter basketball league for our teens, for girls and for boys. And I've been coaching the girls team at my church since my first daughter, since my daughter was born. She now plays on the team. So girls basketball is important to me. So I'm having what I'm calling the women's SDB basketball game. And we're inviting our female pastors, pastors' wives, Sabbath school teachers, and leaders within the church to challenge our young teenaged Seventh-day Baptist girls to a basketball game prior to the youth versus pastors game. As I mentioned, church basketball and church softball. I like to play softball. I coach that as well. So I've secured a field at conference so we can have a softball game at conference. So pack your gloves, pack your cleats, pack some Tylenol, and come on out. We'll say that conference will be about steadfast, friendly competition. How many of you have ever heard of Sight and Sound? All right, that's a live action show. This year it's going to be Joseph. That's available right there in Lancaster, and tickets are available when you register. We'll have transportation provided so you can go over and enjoy this live action show in Amish country. I have a few fun competitions for our churches. And how many of you ever seen Family Feud on TV? I'm putting together a church Family Feud for some fun. As I've traveled around this past years, I have actually surveyed 100 Seventh-day Baptists to put together a fun game for Thursday night at conference. Let me ask you, how many of you know your Bible? How many of you have ever heard of Bible quizzing? We're going to have a Bible quiz that night as well. For those of you that might not know how Bible quizzing works, your team of 5 will square off against 2 other teams of 5. You'll have gone over a section of Scripture beforehand, and you're asked to complete this sentence, finish this verse. When was this said? I don't want to necessarily stoke inter-associational rivalries, but I have talked to the Boulder Church. They're planning on putting a team together to send, so maybe North Loop could do the same and come prepared at conference. If you haven't seen it in the recorder, I'll give you the breaking news that it's going to be based on Philippians. That's 4 chapters, the King James Version. We do stress King James Version because it is finish this verse, so we want you to be in the same translation that will be used. So we'll look for Conference 2015 to be about steadfast entertainment. Now those are a few of the activities I have planned. I'm hoping you can participate. Keep in mind, if you can't make it to conference, we are going to live stream it so you can follow along with many of the activities at home on your computer. But I'm hoping you'll find it of interest enough to come and participate. You can follow along by asking me today with questions. You can also follow along with any of the denominational social media options, some of which are shown up here for you. We'll say that Conference 2015 is about steadfast networking as we fellowship with our fellow Christian brothers and sisters at conference in Lancaster. Now that I've given you that rather long commercial on what to expect at conference, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the theme I have. And the theme for this year is steadfast. And when I was asked to be the conference president, almost immediately I felt God giving me the word steadfast. Now I had that word in my head and I had an idea what steadfast means. But to be clear, I looked it up. You go to the dictionary, you go to the internet, you look it up, and steadfast means to stand firm, to hold fixed to a belief, to a person, to a choice you have made. That's to be steadfast. And I think everyone can be and is steadfast about something in their lives. The very nature of being steadfast implies it's not something you decide to suddenly be. You're not suddenly steadfast. It's something that means something to you, and it can show over a period of time. If I use myself as an example, anyone that knows me even a little bit knows that I'm a fan of a particular football team. They can see that from maybe the clothes I wear, the team I root for, and know that I'm steadfast in my support of that football team. I love presidential history. I've visited various presidential libraries, historical sites, so you could argue that I'm steadfast in my desire to seek out these places. I even have an app on my phone that will tell me where the nearest one is. So a bit of a story to that. My kids regret that I got that to this day, as you can imagine. And so I travel. And with visual proof, I have actually over-visited some sites where my kids finally say, "That's it, Dad, I'm not getting out of the car. You go, I'll wait here." So hopefully you can sympathize with them. I enjoy bike riding. Okay, that's something that's steadfast to me. My desire to go out as a stress reliever, I go bike riding. Now, I haven't been able to do that quite as much as I would like with my traveling, but I still, after 20 years of bike riding, still would consider myself a steadfast bike rider. I like to get out on my bicycle and exercise. It would be a little more of a challenge out here with the hills, but it's something I like to do and something that I feel refreshed after I do. I'm also glad to be a Seventh-day Baptist, and I think I would be considered a steadfast Seventh-day Baptist. I'm blessed to represent the denomination this year and travel to the various churches. But that blessing only came after a lifetime spent at church and honoring the Sabbath. Now, it's not always the easiest thing to do when you're at school, at college, or in the workplace. Where I work, I've been there for close to 25 years now, and on occasion, we have need to work overtime on a project. I'm an engineer for a company that designs water treatment facilities. So sometimes there is a deadline we have to get done, and we need to work overtime in order to get that done. In my first few years on the job, we had such a project come up, and the company was going to be working longer hours and working on the weekends. Now, I had prayed that God would allow me to be a productive worker, but in doing so, that I would still be able to honor Him and come to church. It was interesting to me when I overheard the president of my company come out and speak to my supervisor. He said he expected everyone to be at work this Saturday morning except Bill Probasco. So I realized then that I had been steadfast enough in my Sabbath keeping. I had told people I'm Seventh-day Baptist, I go to church, enough of them knew that I did that it wound up not being an issue, and they worked around it. I would be in church worshiping God since they already knew I was not available to come to work Saturday morning. Another time more recently, when we were again working overtime, now I was the supervisor. One of my colleagues came to me, one of the other supervisors, and said, I will work for you Saturday morning so that you can go to church, if you can cover some of the other time. So I was very thankful again that God gave me that opportunity to make it to church. And when we finished our timekeeping for that project, I had managed to put in more time than the rest of them and still be in church on Sabbath day. So that was a praise that I had, that God had provided that opportunity for me to show amongst my coworkers. And when God gave me this concept of being steadfast, I took it as a challenge to myself. As I mentioned, are you being steadfast enough in your faith? Was I willing to serve the Lord even when other responsibilities, other events would arise? I've cited several examples. I ride my bike when I can. I root for my football team. And I'm a Seventh-day Baptist. I realize when I go a couple of weeks or a couple of months without riding my bike, I miss that exercise and relaxation. If my team loses a tough game, I know there'll be another game next week or next season, as the case may be. And I know if I'm traveling or maybe I'm sick and I didn't make it out to church one week, my spirit yearns to get back as soon as possible. I see the theme of steadfast as God calling me to step up and be more reliable in my walk with Him. Now, my wife, all along this past year, has viewed the theme of steadfast, as she says, from the top down. To her, it's all about God's steadfastness. She sees it as being about His mercy and His love, His faithfulness in providing for us. She's quick to remind me that when she was home with our children when they were young, and we were living just off of my income, God provided. A church member would drop off a bag of clothes that their children had outgrown and fortunately not worn out. Our pastor would invite us over for a meal just about the time the cupboard was bare. And our family made us aware of a reasonably priced automobile when ours needed to be replaced. All ways that God had showered down blessings on us. Now, when I think of steadfast men in the Bible, I think of one of my favorite stories, and that's Joshua. He, to me, exemplifies my bottom-up view of being steadfast. From an early age, he served the Lord. If you remember, he was one of 2 out of the 12 spies who went to the Promised Land and came back having seen the blessings God had for them, and not just giants. He acted as the assistant for Moses before finally taking over for Moses and leading the children of Israel. It always amazes me with the children of Israel that of all the people in all of history, they would struggle with their faith because they oftentimes were not steadfast. They were God's chosen people. Now, they are slaves to the Egyptians. God sends plagues. Not 1, not 2, not 4, but 10 progressively worse plagues to prove to the Israelites as much as to the Egyptians who's the one true God. They're trapped in the desert and the approaching Egyptian army comes after them. You've seen the movies, right? He parts the Red Sea. I mean, just imagine seeing the Red Sea part and falling away from your faith later on. It still amazes me. They wander in the desert with no sign of food. God sends manna and quail for them. They have no land of their own. God provides pre-built cities, pre-planted vineyards, pre-laid roadways. Yet, they don't remain true. Joshua leads them through much of this and reminds them, even again at the end of his life, that they could choose this day whom they will serve. But for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. See, Joshua was a steadfast man. He strove to be faithful to God's calling. His steadfastness was lifted up. He did what he could to rise to the occasion whenever called upon by God. He was the leader of Israel, and much depended on how he handled himself. He continued even until his death to be steadfast in his commitment to God. He tried to lift his people up to serve the Lord. Yet we also see that in Joshua's life, it wasn't really him. He led Israel, but he was following God. God poured out his mercy on the Israelites, even when they really didn't deserve it. It was God's steadfast love pouring down on them that would keep them alive and growing, even in a desert. We read in Psalms chapter 1 of the verses that I cite. Another is in Jeremiah 17. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, and whose trust is the Lord. For he will be like a tree planted by the water, that extends its roots by a stream, and it will not fear when the heat comes. But its leaves will be green, and it will not be anxious in a year of drought, nor cease to yield fruit. In the verses that precede this, it talks about the man who trusts in man. That man is like the heath of the desert, inhabiting parched places. Heath is a scrub-like plant. Kind of think of the tumbleweeds rolling through the old Western movies. An obvious contrast between the man who trusts in the Lord and is compared to a well-watered tree. That's where my logo comes in. I showed earlier. You see the river that flows by this grand tree. And I think God gave me this mental image when He gave me the word steadfast. It's a strong tree planted by the river, a tree that is steadfast, holding firm against the rain, against storms, against tremors. I mentioned earlier about coaching basketball. This winter basketball league that my church is involved in has been doing so for 50 years now. And the only requirement is attendance to Sabbath school, to youth groups, to come out to church 3 out of 4 weeks. Right? They don't even have to dribble, regrettably. That's all the kids need to do is come out. See, the league has been operating now, and I've been involved with it for about half that time, whether as a player or a coach. It's a steadfast commitment I've made to reach out to the youth at my church. Now, I'm sure my wife doesn't appreciate losing every Saturday night during the winter to my coaching, but she supports me in this. And as I mentioned, my daughter now plays. She's kind of stuck. I could walk away from coaching these girls. I could walk away from this commitment, but I don't. Even in years when we don't win a single game, like this last season. I know that for some of these girls, their commitment to the basketball team is the only thing that ties them into coming to church or to youth group. And maybe it's a sad statement on their commitment, but at least I know it's a start. Maybe it's a seed I can help to plant that one day saves their soul. I know for some of these girls, God is still a mystery, and they might question if He really loves them. So I pray for these girls, and I pray that their desire to be on the team will result in them coming to a realization of what salvation there is in Jesus Christ. God can dramatically enter their lives, even if they think they're well down a road they can't turn back from. Because God allows U-turns. So if you're running down the wrong road, or maybe you've stopped along that road and you're not moving forward anymore, that doesn't matter. God is so steadfast that we don't need to be perfect. God will allow us to back up. God will allow us to turn the car off or the motorcycle and get off and walk, if that's what it's going to take to get us going in the right direction. See, God has such steadfast love for all of His children that He wants them all to experience it. It's poured out for us by a Savior on a cross, bending down to reach us. So let's share that love in a steadfast way and thank someone for doing what they do. Even if you don't know the person or don't know them very well, thank someone as you leave church today. For helping with children's ministries, for running a program out to the camp, for teaching Sabbath school class when you were growing up, for preaching each week, even for just coming out and fellowshipping. A little bit of support goes a long way. If we think back to my tree that's planted by the waterside, when you're surrounded by other trees, the winds of the world may blow, but they won't seem so bad. See, God wants to plant forests, not one-tree hills. Because He planted one tree on a hill back at Calvary many years ago. And because of that one tree in which Jesus was nailed, we're stronger for His steadfast sacrifice. Our previous conference president told us to choose. That was his theme. I think that's still our theme. I hope you choose to be steadfast. And I hope you can make it to Lancaster next month and join us for that. But if not, God bless, and God bless your steadfast faith to the Lord. Thank you.